Hello and welcome to In Focus Kentucky. I'm Mario Anderson. Each week, this program will take a look at issues that matter to you right here in the Bluegrass State. We'll talk to the lawmakers, community organizers, and residents who help shape those policies. Today, we're going to focus on the topic of unemployment in Kentucky. We'll take a look at the overall picture and the differences in pay for men and women, and we'll dig deeper into some of the resources available to Kentucky women in the workforce. But first, let's look at what the gender pay gap looks like on the national level. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, working women nationally make 80% of what men make for the same work, and it's even worse for women of color. Black women make 63% of what their male counterparts make, and Hispanic women make just 54%. The situation for women is a little better in Kentucky, and it's continuing to improve. According to the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, women make 82% of what men make for the same work. The gap is narrowing, but not for the reasons you might think. And we are now joined by Anna Baughman, who is the Senior Policy Analyst, one of the Senior Policy Analysts with the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. Thank you for joining us today, Anna.
Thanks, Mario. So good to be here.
And we want to talk about that 2016 study that you authored called The State of Working Kentucky. What types of research went into the study?
Well, basically, we were looking at a bunch of data, which is collected in an ongoing fashion, but wanted to kind of take a look at how things were for working Kentuckians at that point in time. So we looked at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and also from census to kind of get a snapshot of, employment levels, wages, whether folks had as much work as they wanted, and a number of other factors that kind of shape how Kentuckians experience the labor market.
And how is Kentucky doing based off of some of the research that you've been able to compile?
Well, so things have changed, a good bit since we did that last In Focus report in the summer of 2015. We have another year or so of data. And in fact, we'll do another report this coming summer, in the summer of 2018. That similarly looks comprehensively at how things are for Kentucky workers. So I guess, our economy has continued to improve since the last time we did the report. We've been on a steady recovery since 2010. Jobs have continued to grow. In fact, I think the jobs gap that we reported in that report in 2016 was around 50,000, but our jobs have continued to grow since then. So if you factor in the population growth we've had since 2007, as well as the jobs growth, then we're only facing a jobs gap of about 14,000. Right now. So that means that if the same level of Kentuckians were employed today as there were in December of 2007 before the recession, we'd see about that many more people working. So things have improved. As we reported in 2016, wages had finally started to grow after, almost 2 decades of stagnation. Wage growth was stronger in 2015 than it was in 2016. It's tapered off, and in fact, for people on the lower end of the wage distribution, so for lower wage workers, they've actually seen some losses over the last year. But overall, the economy has continued to improve, and that means workers are generally doing a little better as well.
Now, according to that 2016 study, employment to population ratio, and you kind of touched on this, between 25 to 54-year-old, that ratio is still kind of low. What do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, I want to explain why that's an important indicator. It's called the prime age employment to population ratio, and what it does is it looks at just that prime age segment of our population. So it excludes out people over 54, so people who might be retiring out of the labor force. And that's important because we know that the baby boomers have comprised a large share of our labor force. And as they retire, if we don't narrow our scope to just the prime age workers, then it looks like we're losing a lot more. Then it looks like the decline in our labor force is really bigger a problem than it is. I mean, it's still an issue, but a big part of that decline in our labor force participation is the retiring of the baby boomer population. So when we look at just the prime age employment to population ratio, we're just looking at what share of our prime age population between the ages of 25 and 54 are actually employed. And that figure is still down from where it was in the early 2000s, so we haven't recovered from the last two recessions. But it is higher than it's been since 2007. And so that indicates, again, that our economy has continued to improve and that as more jobs have been added to the labor market, more people are returning to work. And so that ratio, again, is improving. It's at about 73.4% in 2016.
And sticking with that labor force and also the job market, the gender gap between men and women, it's definitely closing, but it's not always for good reasons. What would you say is one of those reasons?
Well, yeah, so specifically talking about the employment to population ratio, more generally over the long term, men's has fallen and women's has risen. And now that ratio has not gotten back, the employment level for women has not gotten back to where it was in 2000, nor for men. So we're still doing worse for both women and men since before the last two recessions. But over the long term, that gap has been narrowing. And one reason is that, we've lost a large number of jobs that were typically held by men with less education in goods-producing industries. So in manufacturing, construction, mining and natural resources. So as we've lost those jobs, as our economy more generally has shifted from a goods-producing to a service-producing economy, and therefore there are fewer good-paying jobs, specifically, again, for men with less education, we've seen alongside that trend a decrease in the employment levels for men.
And what about pay and wages? How does that factor into kind of some of the research that you found over this last several years?
Well, it goes right alongside the trend that I was just describing. So, as I said, those goods-producing jobs in manufacturing, in construction, mining, and resources that we have lost typically were good-paying jobs. And so as those have been replaced by lower-wage service jobs, in the restaurant and hospitality industry, in temporary agencies, that sort of thing, wages overall have stagnated or even declined for people on the lower end of the wage distribution. So again, another area where the gap is closing between men and women is the wage gap. I think in 2 decades ago it was about 74 cents on the dollar. A decade ago maybe 84, and then I think in most recently in 2016, women were making 88 cents on the dollar that men made, so that gap is closing. And that is because women are earning more, but it's also because men are earning less, including because of the shift I described.
Now, Anna, for people that would like to learn more about your study or kind of find out about the work that you all do in Berea, how do they find out more information?
Well, absolutely go to our website, www.kypolicy.org. We have a lot of great research on the labor market in Kentucky, on how the economy is working for average people. And we have a lot of information on the kind of policies that would support a better labor market for Kentuckians. We also do a lot of research on the state budget and taxes. You can find all of that at our website. You can follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. And there are a bunch of resources that you could spend half of 2018 reading our website.
Well, once again, we appreciate you stopping by and talking with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Up next, we'll take a look at a local Lexington organization whose sole mission is to empower women to achieve economic independence. Stay tuned. You're watching In Focus Kentucky.